Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a deep plunge into a text that has, well, influenced leaders, strategists, and thinkers for literally millennia. It's Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
An absolute classic.
Exactly. And our mission today is clear. We want to cut through some of the noise, distill the real essence of its wisdom, and show you how these ancient principles offer surprisingly powerful, practical insights for pretty much any complex challenge you might face.
Whether that's on the actual battlefield or maybe in a boardroom or even just navigating a tricky situation.
Right. We're not just like reading the book aloud. We're digging in, extracting the most important nuggets of knowledge. The goal is to help you become truly well-informed, and we'll uncover some surprising facts along the way, too.
And, to really appreciate the depth here, it helps to understand how this ancient text actually reached us in the West. Our deep dive today is primarily based on Lionel Giles's 1910 English translation.
Ah, yes, the Giles translation.
Which, for over 50 years, was really the standard. It was a proper scholarly work. And it significantly refined some earlier attempts that were, well, frankly, pretty flawed.
I always find that backstory so interesting. Before Giles, things were, let's just say a bit of a strategic mess, translation-wise.
That's a good way to put it.
There was Joseph Amiot, a French Jesuit, who did an early French translation way back in 1782. But Giles himself later pointed out that Amiot kind of added things Sun Tzu never wrote and left out some crucial parts.
Yeah, not ideal.
And then the first English translation by Captain Calthrop in 1905, Giles basically called it excessively bad, just riddled with blunders and distortions. It really makes you appreciate the effort involved in getting it right.
Absolutely. And Giles, who was a leading sinologue China expert at the British Museum, wasn't really driven by ego. He just felt strongly that Sun Tzu deserved a truly definitive edition.
He really poured himself into it, didn't he? Creating this scholarly work with tons of notes.
He did. And his dedication really shaped how the Western world first encountered Sun Tzu in a serious way.
It's kind of remarkable, though, that even with Giles's excellent work, widespread interest in the art of war in English-speaking countries didn't really explode until, around the time of the Second World War.
That's right. It often takes major events, doesn't it, to make us look back at older wisdom with fresh eyes. The context suddenly makes it relevant again.
Yeah, exactly.
And even later, when Samuel Griffith published another translation in '63, which is very good, very lucid, it still, arguably, lacked the sheer depth and meticulous detail of Giles's original scholarly notes.
And we should probably give a nod to Bob Sutton, too, right?
We should, because he took Giles's 1910 text and converted it into an e-text, making it accessible online.
Yeah.
And he was very candid, admitting his complete ignorance of Chinese.
He just wanted people to be able to read it easily.
Precisely. His goal was accessibility, keeping as much important text as possible for the sort of casual reader, even if it meant a bit of paraphrasing here and there. That act alone opened the door for a much wider audience.
Which naturally brings us to our first big point. The legacy of the work itself, but also the contested origins of the art of war. Because even though it's such a classic, the actual historical existence of its author, Sun Wu, or Sun Tzu as we usually call him, well, that's been debated for centuries.
It really has. The most, let's say, detailed account we have comes from Sima Qian, who is this revered ancient Chinese historian. He describes Sun Wu as originally from the Chai state. And apparently it was the strategic insights in the art of war itself that brought him to the attention of Ho Lu, who was the king of Wu at the time.
Right, and King Ho Lu sounds like he was intrigued, but maybe, a little skeptical. So he gives Sun Tzu this challenge, this test, that's become pretty legendary. He basically asks, okay, I've read your 13 chapters. Can I test your theories on managing soldiers?
And Sun Tzu, apparently without missing a beat, just says yes.
The king then pushes it. Can the test be applied to women?
Again, Sun Tzu agrees. So they assemble 180 women from the palace, including 2 of the king's absolute favorite concubines. And Sun Tzu appoints these 2 favorites as the leaders, the officers of 2 companies.
Okay, and this is where the story takes a turn that's pretty intense, maybe a bit unsettling for us today.
Definitely. Sun Tzu clearly explains the commands, gongs mean advance, drums mean retreat, turn left, turn right, all of it. But when he gives the first command, turn right, the women just giggle. They don't obey.
So Sun Tzu, being the ultimate pragmatist, says something like, okay, if the commands aren't clear, if the orders aren't understood, that's the general's fault. Fair enough. So he explains everything again, maybe even more clearly.
But then he gives the command again, and same result. More giggling, zero compliance.
And this is the moment that really shows his absolute, maybe even ruthless commitment to military discipline.
Exactly. Sun Tzu declares, if the orders are clear and the soldiers still disobey, then it's the fault of their officers. And with that, he orders the execution of the 2 royal concubines, the appointed leaders.
Wow. The king, you can imagine, is horrified. He sends this urgent message, trying to stop it, saying something like, look, I'm satisfied with your ability. Please don't execute my favorites. It'll spoil my dinner. Basically, it would ruin his enjoyment.
But Sun Tzu's reply is just classic and kind of chilling. He says, having received your majesty's commission as general, there are certain commands of your majesty which, acting in this capacity, I am unable to accept.
Meaning, in the field, the general's orders trump even the king's wishes in that moment.
Precisely. He went through with it. The 2 women were beheaded. Then he appointed new leaders from the ranks.
And what happened next?
It's telling. The remaining women performed the drills perfectly, silently, precisely. No more giggling.
Incredible. And the king?
Olu, despite losing his favorites, was so impressed by the demonstration of discipline that he appointed Sun Tzu as his general. And under Sun Tzu's command, the state of Wu apparently won major victories, especially against the powerful Chu state, even pushing into their capital. It made Wu feared and respected.
So, okay, putting aside the, brutality of the method for a second, what's the core insight here? What does this story tell us?
I think it fundamentally highlights Sun Tzu's absolute belief in discipline, unyielding discipline, and the practical application of principles over sentiment, even when it's incredibly difficult or politically risky. Effective command needs clear rules, accountability, and the will to enforce them.
No matter the cost, almost. The general's authority in the field is paramount.
Exactly. It really sets the tone for the whole book. Strategy isn't about feelings, it's about effectiveness, and execution demands total commitment. But, ironically, this very vivid story leads us straight into that historical puzzle.
Right. The question of whether Sun Tzu even existed historically. Because Sima Qian tells this great story, but the Tsochuan, which is a major historical record from roughly the same period, doesn't mention Sun Wu at all. No general, no writer by that name.
It's a really significant silence, isn't it? Scholars later on, like Shu Xin and the Sung dynasty, pointed this out. They argued it's just unbelievable that such a famous, successful general would be completely missing from this key record.
Yeah, seems odd.
Shu Xin even suggested maybe The Art of War wasn't written by this specific Sun Wu from that specific time. Maybe it was written later, perhaps by some private scholar, during the really chaotic warring states period, which came after the time Sima Qian places Sun Tzu.
Okay, so there's real skepticism there, but what's the counter-argument? How do we defend the traditional view?
Well, the counter-arguments usually focus on internal evidence within the text itself.
Yeah.
Details that seem to strongly suggest an earlier date, making a later forgery less likely.
Like what kind of details?
Things like allusions to ancient land tenure systems that were already fading out by the time of later philosophers like Mencius, or descriptions of warfare that heavily feature armored chariots, which were a style of fighting that largely disappeared before the end of the Chu dynasty.
Okay, so details about society and technology that place it earlier.
Exactly. And the text consistently speaks from the perspective of a man of Wu, reflecting the specific circumstances and language of that state. And the state of Wu itself ceased to be an independent power around 473 BC. So these little things help anchor the text in that earlier period.
That makes sense.
Plus, the whole feel of the work seems grounded in personal observation and experience. It reads like it was written by a practical soldier, a born strategist, someone deeply familiar with the realities of war in that era, not like something cooked up by a scholar in a library centuries later.
And there's the interesting analogy you mentioned from the outline about Wu and Yue crossing a river.
Yes, in chapter 11. He uses this image of people from these 2 rival states, Wu and Yu, who normally hate each other, but if they were the same boat during a storm, they'd cooperate like left and right hands.
Okay.
The significance is that this implies the book was written after Wu's main conflict had shifted away from the Chu state and towards the state of Yue becoming their primary rival. That historical shift happened after 506 BC, probably in the decade or so after that, during the Wu-Yue conflict.
Which actually contradicts Sima Qian's timing a bit, right? Because he places Sun Wu earlier when Chu was the main enemy.
Exactly. It's a subtle clue, but it suggests the text might have been compiled or written slightly later than the traditional story suggests, but still firmly within that Wu period, likely when Yue was the main focus. So while the exact biography of Sun Tzu the man remains a bit hazy, The authenticity of the text as a product of that specific ancient military thinking seems really strong.
So the wisdom itself stands, regardless of the biographical details.
Precisely. And that wisdom is why the art of war has had such an enduring value. One of the clearest signs of its depth is just the sheer number of commentaries written about it throughout Chinese history.
Like Sun Tzu said, the ideas are so inexhaustible they can be interpreted in countless ways.
Exactly. And one of the earliest and maybe greatest commentators was Sun Tzu, also known as Wei Wu Ti, a genuine military genius from the 2nd century AD.
Right, a real practitioner.
His notes on Sun Tzu are famous for being incredibly brief, almost austere. So concise, like a commander giving orders, that sometimes his notes need their own commentary to figure out. But he clearly applied Sun Tzu's principles successfully in his own campaigns, which massively boosted the book's reputation as a practical guide.
Then you have someone like Mu, centuries later in the 9th century. He was a famous poet, interestingly, with zero practical war experience.
A completely different background.
Yeah. But his commentary is really extensive, full of historical examples. And he kind of boiled down Sun Tzu's message to this. Practice benevolence and justice, but on the other hand, make full use of artifice and measures of expediency.
A fascinating balance.
He believed that basically every military success or failure for 1,000 years proved Sun Tzu right, which suggests the principles resonate even if you haven't commanded troops yourself.
And another key figure was Yao Chen in the 11th century. He was praised for cutting through some of the obstinate prejudices of earlier critics and getting to Sun Tzu's true meaning.
What was his angle?
He particularly stressed that Sun Tzu was writing for states caught up in internecine warfare, those chaotic internal conflicts within China, not necessarily for the grand unified ancient dynasties. He admired Sun Tzu's brevity of diction but deep meaning, and how systematically the book tackled its topics.
These commentaries really show how the book wasn't just read, but actively wrestled with, debated, and applied across centuries. It stayed alive.
Absolutely. And this ongoing engagement touches on a broader point that's often misunderstood.
Yeah.
The Chinese perspective on war itself. We often think of China culturally as primarily peace-loving.
Right, the Confucian influence.
But China also has an incredibly long and extensive history of warfare, arguably more than almost any other civilization. They built the Great Wall, maintained huge armies centuries before Rome was even a major power.
It's crucial context. So while Confucianism generally opposed militarism, there were always other viewpoints acknowledging that, well, sometimes war is necessary.
Exactly. Even Sima Qian, the historian we mentioned, argued that military weapons are the means used by the sage to control violence, punish wrongdoers, and protect the good. He actually criticized scholars who just condemned weapons outright, saying that leads to weakness and dishonor.
So the idea wasn't necessarily that war is good, but that military capability is a necessary tool of statecraft, like a form of government action.
Pretty much. Akin to judicial punishment, aimed at maintaining order. So military theory wasn't seen as inherently immoral, but as an essential skill for rulers and generals. Even Confucius himself, apparently, engaged in warlike preparations and criticized using violence without being properly prepared.
Interesting. So being ready for conflict was seen as part of wisdom.
Yes, the idea wasn't to be eager for war, but to be competent if it came. As one source puts it, weapons are baneful and fighting perilous, and a general who isn't constantly practicing shouldn't risk people's lives. It's about responsible readiness.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. Let's dive into those foundational principles then. The real pillars of Sun Tzu's strategic thinking that make this book so timeless.
Right. We have to start with Chapter 1, Laying Plans. Sun Tzu immediately hits you with the gravity of it. The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected.
No pressure then. It's not just about winning, it's about survival. For a nation, for a company, maybe even for a career, the stakes of strategy are incredibly high.
Absolutely. And central to assessing the situation are what he calls the 5 constant factors. These are the fundamental things you have to consider. First, the moral law.
The moral law, what does that mean exactly?
It's about the harmony between the people and their ruler. Are they in complete accord? Will they follow their leader into danger? Think of it as organizational alignment, shared purpose, high morale. Absolutely critical for any team effort.
Okay, so unity and belief in the cause. Makes sense. What's next?
Second is heaven. This covers environmental factors, night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons, the natural cycles. It's about understanding timing, maybe market cycles today, or even just the weather, and how those external, often uncontrollable factors influence your plans.
Right, the context you operate within, then Earth.
Earth is the physical terrain. Distances, danger versus security, open ground versus narrow passes, the literal ground you fight on. In business, this could be your market landscape, your supply chain, your infrastructure, knowing the playing field.
Got it. Fourth.
Fourth is the commander. This focuses on the leader's virtues: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. These aren't just nice traits. They are the core characteristics that enable effective leadership, build trust, and guide decisions.
Wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness. Okay.
Right.
And the fifth factor.
Method and discipline. This is the practical stuff. The organization of the army, ranks, supply lines, control of spending. It's about structure, efficiency, logistics, the operational nuts and bolts. Without good process, even a great strategy falls apart.
So moral law, heaven, earth, commander, method, and discipline. Those are the 5 lenses.
Exactly. And based on those, Sun Tzu gives you 7 considerations, basically 7 questions to ask yourself before you engage to figure out who's likely to win.
Like a checklist for victory.
Sort of. Things like, which ruler has stronger moral law? Which general is more able? Who has the advantages of heaven and earth? Whose discipline is more rigorous? Whose army is stronger morally and physically? Whose officers and men are better trained? And who is more consistent with rewards and punishments?
It really sounds like a pre-battle strategic audit, analyzing yourself and the opponent across all those key dimensions.
Precisely. And this leads him to that famous line. The general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. Planning isn't optional, it's determinative.
Meticulous planning based on those factors.
Yeah.
And a huge part of that planning involves the opponent, which brings us to deception.
Ah, yes. Perhaps his most famous and maybe most controversial principle. All warfare is based on deception.
That's the big one. What does he mean by that in practice?
It means constantly manipulating the enemy's perception. If you're able to attack, you need to seem unable. If you're actively using your forces, you need to appear inactive. If you're nearby, make the enemy think you're far away. If you're far off, make them believe you're close.
It's all about misdirection, leading them to misjudge your strength, your location, your intentions.
Exactly. Holding out baits to lure them, feigning disorder to make them complacent, then crushing them. If they're secure, be prepared. If they're stronger, evade them. If the enemy commander has a temper, irritate him. If you are strong, pretend to be weak, so they become arrogant.
It's like psychological warfare almost, playing on their assumptions and emotions.
Very much so. And this feeds into a really dynamic concept, the interplay between the direct and the indirect, or Cheng and CHI, as he calls them.
Cheng and CHI. Okay, break that down.
Cheng is the direct approach, the straightforward attack, hitting them where they expected, the conventional move. CHI is the indirect, the unexpected, the surprise attack, the flanking maneuver, the diversion. Think of it like a feint in boxing before the real punch.
So like setting up a predictable pattern and then breaking it with something surprising, CHI.
Yes, but what's really sophisticated is that he says they're interchangeable. CI may also be Cheng, and Cheng may also be CHI. The key is constantly shifting between them to confuse the enemy so they can never figure out your real plan.
Wow. Okay, so the feint might become the main attack, or the main attack might just be a setup for the real move elsewhere.
Exactly. He uses these great analogies like how just 5 musical notes or 5 primary colors can create endless variations. He says Cheng and CHI combine to produce an endless series of maneuvers. They lead on to each other in turn, like moving in a circle. It's never static.
That's a really powerful idea. Constant adaptation and unpredictability.
And this mastery of deception aims for what he calls invisibility and inaudibility. Through subtlety and secrecy, by hiding your plans and movements, you become like unreadable to the enemy. You hold their fate in your hands because they can't anticipate you.
Being the ghost in the machine, as you said earlier, controlling the narrative, controlling their perception.
Which leads us naturally to the next core idea, the absolute primacy of preparation and positioning. You can't be deceptive or invisible without laying the groundwork meticulously.
Right. It's not just about clever tricks in the moment.
No. Sun Tzu says, the good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy. Notice the order there.
First, make yourself secure. Then look for the chance to win.
Exactly. And here's the key insight. Security against defeat is in our own hands. It comes from our preparation, our discipline, our positioning. but the opportunity to actually defeat the enemy often comes from them, from their mistakes, their overconfidence, their weaknesses.
So you control your own defensibility, but you have to be patient and observant to seize the opportunity the enemy gives you.
Precisely. And true excellence, he argues, isn't about winning flashy battles that everyone cheers. It's more subtle. It's about planning secretly, moving stealthily, foiling the enemy's plans before they even happen, so the day may be won without shedding a drop of blood.
Winning with ease, as he puts it, not because it was easy, but because the preparation made it look easy. Solving the problem before it becomes a fight.
Yes, winning by making no mistakes, no wasted effort, no futile attacks. It's about efficiency and foresight. He also emphasizes concentrating force, achieving victory by flinging the great mass of your forces against a few points of the enemy. Overwhelming local superiority.
Focus your strength where it matters most, where the enemy is vulnerable. Don't spread yourself thin.
And this culminates in that amazing paradox. The victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and afterwards looks for victory.
It still kind of bends my mind a little. Win first, then fight.
It means your planning, your positioning, your understanding of the situation should be so thorough that the outcome is virtually certain before the engagement starts. You've created an unassailable position. The battle itself is just the confirmation.
Wow, okay. That's a high bar for preparation.
It is. And he uses that beautiful analogy of water to describe how tactics should adapt. Military tactics are like unto water, he says. Water naturally avoids high places and flows downwards.
So, in war,
The way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak. It's the path of least resistance but maximum impact. Don't bang your head against their strongest point, find their vulnerability.
and just like water takes the shape of the ground, it flows over.
The soldier shapes his victory in relation to the enemy he faces. There are no constant conditions in war, just as water has no constant shape. The brilliant leader is the one who can constantly modify tactics based on the opponent and the situation. Ultimate adaptability.
Avoid strength, strike weakness, and be like water. Got it. Now, shifting gears a bit, Sun Tzu gets really practical about the execution, starting with something often overlooked: the money.
Ah, yes. Chapter 2, Waging War. And he is brutally realistic about the cost. He doesn't just say war is expensive, he lists it out. The cost of chariots, armor, soldiers' pay, feeding them over vast distances, even things like glue and paint for repairs back home, entertaining envoys.
He calculates it down to 1,000 ounces of silver per day for a decent-sized army, which must have been an astronomical sum back then, a huge drain.
A massive drain on the state's resources. And this incredible cost is exactly why he warned so strongly against protracted warfare. Long campaigns are ruinous.
He says, if victory is long in coming, then men's weapons will grow dull and their ardor will be damped. Morale drops, supplies run low.
Sieges exhaust your strength, and while you're tied down, other enemies might take advantage of your weakness. He's unequivocal. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare.
It reminds me of business projects that just drag on forever, burning cash and enthusiasm until they collapse.
It's a perfect analogy. The longer it takes, the higher the risk of failure and the greater the cost. So the logical conclusion for Sun Tzu is the absolute imperative of rapidity.
Speed. He says something like, we've heard of stupid haste in war, but never cleverness with long delays.
Right. He's not saying be reckless, but be decisive. Act quickly once the plan is made. He argues that only someone who truly understands the evils of war, the costs, the suffering, can understand the profitable way to wage it, which is swiftly.
Get in, achieve the objective, get out, minimize the drain.
Exactly. A skillful general, he says, does not raise a second levy, doesn't call up reinforcements constantly. Neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. You move fast, you live off the land if possible.
Which leads to his point about foraging on the enemy.
A controversial idea, perhaps, but practical. A wise general makes a point of it because one cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. It solves your supply problem and weakens the enemy simultaneously. Turn their resources against them.
It underlines the general's immense responsibility, doesn't it? Managing these costs, making these tough decisions.
Absolutely. He says the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, determining whether the nation is at peace or in peril. The economic and human stakes are enormous.
Okay, so manage resources carefully, prioritize speed. What about actually moving the army, maneuvering and dealing with terrain?
This, he says, is actually the most difficult part, second only to the initial planning. The goal is turning the devious into the direct and misfortune into gain, finding clever ways to navigate obstacles and turn them to your advantage.
But he warns against just rushing blindly, right? The forced marches.
Oh, strongly. He gives specific calculations. Marching 100 line, maybe 30 miles nonstop, risks losing your commanders and arriving with only a tenth of your army fit for battle. Even a 50-line march might cost you half your force and the commander of the vanguard.
Why such high costs?
Because, as he says, an army without its baggage train is lost. Without provisions, it is lost. Without bases of supply, it is lost. You need logistics, you need rest, you need supplies. Pushing too hard leads to exhaustion, breakdown, and vulnerability. Sustainable movement is key.
So what knowledge does a commander need for maneuvering effectively?
Several things. Knowing the plans of neighboring states, potential allies or enemies, deep familiarity with the terrain, mountains, forests, swamps, pitfalls, and crucially, using local guides. You can't know everything. Leverage local expertise to turn the ground to your advantage.
It's like market intelligence and using local partners in business.
Exactly. And then he describes the ideal way to move and position your army using these wonderful similes. Be swift like the wind, fast, untraceable.
Compact like the forest ordered, disciplined, hard to surprise.
In raiding, be like fire fierce, consuming your objective. In holding position, be immovable like a mountain, steadfast, not easily lured away.
And plans should be dark like night, but your attack like a thunderbolt. Elusive planning, decisive action.
Beautifully put. He then gets really granular about terrain in Chapter X, identifying 6 basic types. Accessible ground, where you can move freely, occupy the high, sunny spots.
Entangling ground, easy to get out of, hard to get back into, like a niche market, maybe? He says attack only if the enemy's unprepared there.
Good analogy. Temporizing ground where neither side gains by moving first. A stalemate. Patience is key. Don't be lured out. Narrow passes, critical choke points. Seize them first if you can. If the enemy holds them, don't attack directly into the bottleneck.
Precipitous heights, occupy the high ground, the sunny side. If the enemy has them, try to lure them down. And positions at great distance where fighting is disadvantageous if strengths are equal. Sometimes avoiding battle is the better move.
This shows a really nuanced understanding of how geography dictates tactics. But he goes even deeper in Chapter 11 with the 9 situations, or 9 varieties of ground.
Okay, 9 more. This gets complex.
It does, but it highlights adaptability. For example, dispersive ground is your own territory near home. Soldiers might be tempted to scatter, their families are close, so you don't fight a major battle there. You focus on unifying the army, building resolve.
Makes sense. Keep them focused. What else?
Desperate ground. This is where you're cornered, where you'll be destroyed unless you fight immediately. Here, there's no choice. You must fight for survival. It's do or die.
The ultimate backs against the wall scenario.
Right. And related is hemmed-in ground, narrow gorges, difficult retreat routes. Here he says you must resort to stratagem and maybe even block your own escape route.
Block your own retreat. Why?
To inspire desperate courage. If there's no way out, soldiers fight much harder. It's a high-risk, high-reward tactic to force maximum commitment.
Wow. These specific responses for different terrains really emphasize that there's no single right answer. It's all about context.
Exactly. It's the essence of adaptability, which brings us squarely to generalship and command the human element of leading through all this complexity.
And Sun Tzu is quite clear that the ruler, the sovereign back home, can actually mess things up for the army, right?
Oh, yes. He identified 3 ways a ruler can bring misfortune. First, by hobbling the army, ordering it to advance or retreat when situation on the ground makes it impossible or unwise. Micromanagement from afar.
Like telling your sales team exactly who to call and when without knowing the local market conditions.
Perfect example. Second, trying to govern the army with the same principles used to run a state, ignoring the specific military needs for flexibility and opportunism, applying bureaucratic rules in a dynamic battlefield.
Restlessness, he calls it, leads to paralysis.
And third, shaking confidence by appointing officers poorly without understanding military needs or the principle of adapting to circumstances. Putting the wrong people in charge erodes trust.
So bad leadership from the top can undermine even a good army. How does a general avoid this and ensure victory?
Sun Tzu lists 5 essentials for victory. The general wins who? 1. Knows when to fight and when not to fight. Strategic judgment.
2. Knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. Tactical flexibility.
3. Whose army has the same spirit throughout all ranks. Unity and morale.
4. Who has prepared himself and waits to take the enemy unprepared. Preparation meets opportunity.
And 5. this is crucial, who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign.
That autonomy point again. The general needs the freedom to make tactical decisions?
Absolutely. As one commentator put it, the sovereign gives broad strategy, but the general decides on the battle. Trust your commanders on the ground.
And this all feeds into probably the most famous line in the entire book.
If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
The cornerstone of strategic thinking. Know yourself, know your opponent.
But he elaborates. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. You might get lucky sometimes based on your own strengths, but ignorance of the other side will eventually catch up with you.
And the worst case?
If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Complete blindness leads to certain failure. It's a powerful argument for deep, objective intelligence gathering on both sides.
There's also that interesting related idea. Attack is the secret of defense. Defense is the planning of an attack. They're intertwined.
Yes, Ma Yao-chen highlighted this. A good defense sets up the conditions for a future attack. A good attack considers how to maintain a strong defensive posture. They aren't separate activities, but parts of a whole.
Okay. Now, just as rulers can make mistakes, generals themselves have potential fatal flaws, right? Sun Tzu lists 5 dangerous faults.
He does, and they're really insightful character flaws applicable to any leader. First, recklessness. Just charging ahead without thinking, bravery without calculation, leads to destruction.
Second, cowardice. Being too fearful, hesitating when you should act, leads to capture or missed opportunities.
Third, a hasty temper. Being easily provoked, getting drawn into fights on the enemy's terms because you lost your cool.
Fourth, over-delicacy about honor or reputation. Being too sensitive to shame, making decisions based on ego rather than sound strategy.
And fifth, misplaced humanity. Being too concerned with your soldiers' immediate comfort, perhaps at the expense of the strategic situation, ultimately leading to their defeat and greater suffering. It's a tough balance.
Those are profound. Recklessness, cowardice, hasty temper, overdelicacy, misplaced humanity, pitfalls any leader could fall into.
Absolutely. And he gives advice on how to treat soldiers too. Regard your soldiers as your children. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they'll follow you anywhere. Empathy builds loyalty.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
Yes, he says if you punish them before that bond of loyalty is formed, they'll be disobedient and useless. But if you don't enforce punishments once that bond is formed, they become like spoiled children, and discipline collapses.
So build trust and care first, then maintain discipline strictly. It's that balance again, care and high standards.
Exactly. Show confidence, insist orders are obeyed, but base it on genuine care. Now here's a really interesting, maybe counterintuitive part about leadership.
Go on.
He says, the general must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances, and thus keep them in total ignorance.
Wait, keep your own troops in the dark? That sounds problematic, almost manipulative.
It does sound that way to modern ears, doesn't it? But his reasoning seems to be about focus and morale. The idea is that the average soldier or even junior officer doesn't need to know the entire complex strategic picture.
Why not?
Because it might confuse them or cause unnecessary fear or doubt, especially if the situation looks grim. He says, confront your soldiers with the deed itself. Never let them know your design. Show them the victory. Don't burden them with a complex, potentially worrying plan beforehand.
When the outlook is bright, bring it before their eyes, but tell them nothing when the situation is gloomy. Manage their perception to maintain fighting spirit.
That seems to be the idea. Prevent panic, prevent second-guessing, keep them focused on their immediate tasks. It's a controversial leadership style, certainly, but it fits his emphasis on control and psychological management.
He even advocates putting troops in deadly peril to make them survive, like Han Heesin putting his troops' backs to the river, forcing that survival instinct.
It's the ultimate calculated risk, creating desperation to unlock peak performance. Again, high risk, high reward. This kind of generalship requires incredible judgment and an almost uncanny ability to read signs.
Reading the signs, he dedicates a whole section to observing subtle cues from the enemy and the environment, doesn't he?
Yes, it's like a field guide to interpreting battlefield behavior. For instance, if the enemy is close but stays quiet and makes no move, they probably rely on a naturally strong position they hold.
Or if they seem aloof but try to provoke you into battle, they likely want you to advance into a trap they've set.
Exactly. An encampment that looks too easy to get into, almost certainly a bait. Look beyond the surface.
He talks about watching trees for movement, indicating an advance, birds rising, signaling an ambush.
Wild animals scattering, suggesting a large force approaching. It's about reading the environment for clues the enemy leaves unintentionally.
And the dust. He gets so specific about dust clouds. High and sharp means chariots, low and wide means infantry.
Branching dust clouds mean foraging parties are out. Small, shifting clouds mean they're setting up camp. It's amazing the level of detail he expects a commander to observe and interpret, like ancient data analysis from visual cues.
If the enemy uses humble words but increases their preparations, they're about to advance, trying to make you complacent.
Violent movements, but no proper formations. Probably a feint. Enemy troops seen running about and then quickly forming ranks. The critical moment is at hand.
Seeing some troops advance while others retreat, likely a lure. Soldiers leaning on their spears, they're hungry.
If men sent for water, drink it themselves first. The army's desperately thirsty. If they see an advantage but don't take it, they're probably exhausted. Birds gathering on a spot. It's likely unoccupied right now.
Whispering in small groups suggests disaffection. Frequent rewards might mean they're running out of resources and trying to boost failing morale.
It's an incredible list. All these tiny observations, when put together, paint a picture of the enemy's condition, morale, and likely intentions. It's about hyper-vigilant, situational awareness.
Seeing the patterns in the noise. Okay, moving towards the end of the book, he covers some specialized tactics, like fire.
Yes, Chapter 12 is on the attack by fire. He outlines 5 main ways: burning soldiers in their camp, burning their supply stores, burning their baggage trains, burning their arsenals, or burning their lines of communication, all aimed at crippling your ability to function.
And he's practical about it too, right? Specifying conditions like dry weather, windy days.
Exactly. He even links it to specific moon constellations believed to correlate with windy days. It's about using nature to amplify the attack.
He also outlines how to react based on the fire. If it breaks out inside, attack. If it breaks out but they stay calm, wait.
Right. Don't attack a prepared enemy just because there's fire, and always stay upwind. Common sense, but crucial.
He briefly contrasts fire with water attacks too. Water can divide or intercept, but it doesn't destroy resources like fire does.
Fire has that uniquely devastating quality. But even amidst these aggressive tactics, he stresses the spirit of enterprise, seizing opportunities, acting decisively. Stagnation is deadly.
Yet he immediately follows with a strong dose of caution.
A very important dose. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply at a peak. Don't let anger or ego drive strategy.
Because anger fades, but a destroyed kingdom or lost lives are permanent.
Precisely. The enlightened ruler is careful, the good general is cautious. This ensures peace and preserves the army. Emotion must be separated from strategic calculation.
Which brings us to the final and arguably most crucial element according to Sun Tzu, intelligence, specifically through spies.
Yes, chapter 13. And he makes a powerful, almost economic argument for why spies are indispensable. He basically says raising huge armies and fighting long wars costs a fortune in lives and treasure. It exhausts everyone.
So to remain ignorant of the enemy's situation because you're too cheap to pay for spies, he says grudging maybe 100 ounces of silver for honors and payments is the height of inhumanity.
It's incredibly short-sighted, a false economy. Someone who does that is no leader of men, no present help to his sovereign, no master of victory. What allows great leaders to win, to achieve things others can't, is foreknowledge.
That critical edge. And where does this foreknowledge come from? Not magic, not guesswork.
No. He's very clear. It cannot be elicited from spirits, not deduced purely from past experience or calculation. Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men, hence spies.
And he breaks them down into 5 types.
Yes, 5 classes, each with a specific role. First, local spies. Just people who live in the enemy's territory and can report what they see.
Second, inward spies. Officials within the enemy's government or military whom you've managed to bribe or recruit. They can reveal plans, sow discord from the inside. Very valuable.
Third, converted spies. These are enemy spies that you capture in turn. You bribe them, make promises, or maybe just pretend you don't know they're a spy and feed them misinformation to take back. The story of Fan Chu using converted spies to get the enemy king to replace a good general with a terrible one is a classic example of this. Strategic manipulation via intelligence.
Fourth, doomed spies. This sounds grim.
It is. These are your own spies whom you deliberately give false information. The expectation is they will be caught by the enemy, pass on the bad intel, and likely be executed once the deception is uncovered. It's a ruthless sacrifice for a strategic advantage.
Wow. And the fifth type.
Surviving spies. These are your agents who go into enemy territory, gather real intelligence, and manage to come back alive with the news. They need to be incredibly resourceful, intelligent, tough, and brave.
So you have this whole network. Locals, insiders, turned agents, disposable agents, and returning agents.
Exactly. And when all 5 types are working together seamlessly, and the enemy can't figure out your system, Sun Tzu calls it divine manipulation of the threads, the sovereign's most precious ability.
And how should you treat these spies?
With extreme care and secrecy. Of all intimate relations, none is more intimate than that with spies. Give them generous rewards, treat them well to ensure loyalty, but above all, maintain absolute secrecy. He even says if spy secrets leak, both the spy and the person they spoke to should be put to death. That's how critical information security is.
It underlines the immense value placed on accurate intelligence. History shows empires have risen and fallen based on espionage.
Absolutely. Figures like Iche and Liu Ya were apparently converted spies who used their inside knowledge to help overthrow dynasties. To Sun Tzu's conclusion is blunt. Spies are vital. An army without them is like a man without ears or eyes, blind, deaf, and doomed.
What a comprehensive strategic framework. We've covered so much ground. The foundations of planning with the 5 factors, the absolute necessity of deception and adaptability, being like water, the harsh economics of war demanding speed, the crucial role of terrain and maneuvering, the qualities and pitfalls of leadership, specialized tactics like fire, and finally, the indispensable nature of foreknowledge through intelligence and spies.
It's incredibly layered, isn't it? Practical, philosophical, psychological, and you can really see how these ideas, though ancient and rooted in warfare, resonate far beyond the battlefield.
Absolutely. They're about understanding complex dynamics, managing limited resources effectively, adapting to constantly changing conditions, the power of information, and how to lead people through difficult situations. That applies everywhere.
Whether it's business strategy, project management, negotiations, even personal challenges, the principles compel you to think more deeply, more strategically.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If Sun Tzu is right that all warfare is based on deception and the greatest victories come when the battle is won before it is fought, what unassailable positions can you build in your own life or work through that kind of deep preparation and understanding? And conversely, what hidden deceptions, maybe from competitors, maybe even your own biases or blind spots, might be stopping you from seeing the best path forward? Are you ever fighting out of pique, as Sun Tzu warned against, or neglecting that vital foreknowledge? Thinking about that might just reveal your next strategic move.